the Hoosier Triplets, a trio of Indiana authors road tripping through the romance genre and sharing what we love and learn. Welcome to our podcast.
So maybe we don't always sell romance, but we're like love, like true love, like even if it's platonic love with, Carrie fishing out Samantha's.
Well, positive relationships, I think, is what we're in the business of.
Yeah.
And I think especially, and I think also for like friends, like best friends, it's the toxic ones, or the good ones, or the ones that you see growing.
Yeah. That's why the found family is so. Yeah. It's such a big trope because
so often the families we're born into are not all that great.
Exactly. So you've got to find your own family. You have to find those familial positive relationships. Just because they're not blood related doesn't mean that they can't be called family. And I think that's the same thing. So anyway, let's introduce the topic we're already talking about.
Dad Bods and selling more than just sex, because it's not cliterature. It's the dream. That's what we're selling here.
So I wonder if I can link in that video. Basically, Cindy sent us a video. Was it a TikTok?
Yes.
And it was a
guy, and I watched it.
And it was a guy who was talking about, you could probably find it on Facebook Reels at some point, or Instagram. But it was a guy talking about true love isn't that initial rush, that, sexy, perfect 10 body, skinny, svelte abs and all that stuff. True love is what happens afterwards when you are there for each other. We're talking about popping the zit on your husband's back, or, things like that, who
You're looking at me, I'll share the story. I knew that my husband and I were in a long haul when I was pregnant, and he had to look at my asshole because I thought I had a hemorrhoid and I didn't know. So, yeah.
Did he know what he was looking for?
I told him to Google what it was going to look like and not show me the pictures, because I didn't want to see what my butthole might have been looking like at that point, because I was always really pregnant and uncomfortable, and it felt like I was shitting glass or just had a piece of glass, in there. I should probably stop cussing before we have to start bleeping me. But yeah, I mean, I may have dropped some I hate you that you did this to me, but I knew after the fact that, we were till death to his part.
I think that is a true show of I'm there for you, love.
Yeah, he's very apologetic.
I had to. So
I probably would not.
This was before my husband and I were married, and he has these subcutaneous cysts that he would insist on poking. And one was behind his ear, and he's like, you couldn't get it, and he's like, would you do this? And I'm just like, of course I'm giving him a hard time. I'm like, well, if you cleaned your ears better, But it wasn't even, it wasn't a hygiene thing. It was just, how he is. And I'm like, okay, apparently we're in this for the long haul, because this isn't something that anybody is going to label, sexy or exciting or anything. It's just two people making a life together. And sometimes you gotta,
Well, like the video said, it's like
do the nasty, and we're not talking sex.
I was going to say, where you can, get fat together, and there's no judgment when you just want to go get tacos and not have to wear a bra.
So then that led us actually to wanting to talk about, we've come full circle, talking about actually dad bods, because dad bods are a trope in romance that I think might be somewhat applicable. Not the zip popping or the or anything else, but at least the body. Like, it's okay for you to be kind of grow chunky together.
Well, I think that when they first started, the authors that were writing them, they were revolutionary. Like, I'm going to write a dad bod.
That's like, I'm going to write a curvy heroine.
Well, yeah.
It's a size 8.
Yeah. Or she's very curvy, but my palm fits around her waist. Which
because apparently you make Andre the Giant look like, average size.
But they were like, we're really, we're claiming new ground. And it's like, okay. I mean, and I know that publishers were way against it. They didn't want it. There were times that publishers did not even want like the less attractive man, like, you know, he wore glasses, we'll make him get contacts, or don't talk so much about his glasses and things like
Take
that.
his glasses off and all of a sudden he's Superman.
Yeah. You know, and I'm all for, I'm all for the dad bod. I mean, you know, go for it. I mean, as you age, children, things get thicker. It's harder to burn the calories. Your metabolism changes. But I read
And that's with 2 C's.
it was one of those monster series of, you know, like the short stories, and he's a vampire, and he's rocking the dad bod, and he keeps apologizing to this human female that I got mad at it. I got mad at the writer. I got mad at the character because he kept apologizing for being a little pudgy. And he tells her at one point something like, if I had known I was going to be changed, I would have worked out more. You know, and I was just like, you know, can we please, you know,
can we normalize
you know,
bodies?
yeah, I mean, you know, again, can we please stop this? Can we please, you know, I was like, yes, I'm sure somebody has had that conversation, not about the vampire unless you believe in them. But, you know, it was just like, I was just like, can we just, you know, she's totally into him. I mean, why are we still belaboring this? I mean, you know, he can smell her arousal. She wants him.
Yeah.
You know, dad bod and all.
Well, I think, okay, and I should have done my research. I would have looked it up on my phone, but I can't have access to it right now. But like has been scientifically proven that like a woman is sort of attracted to different things depending on where she is in her cycle. So, I mean, really, this can go for a woman of all age.
We can take that even in her life, like where, you know, a 20-something might be looking for, you know, that. Now, I'm not saying anything against like 6-pack abs, because I do like visually looking at, you know, a really buff guy. But I know personally, I'm also looking at him going, you're nice eye candy. Yeah. I probably would, you know, make you not talk, because I guarantee stupid shit's going to come out of your mouth.
And all I want to hear about is your protein diet and how many reps you did.
So look at you.
So I would be like, I would want a guy who I feel, well, I mean, even my current husband, like physically, I think, you know, we're more physically similar. We're, you know, both kind of pudgy, and, you know, there's nothing wrong with that, especially in the winter when it's, was it cuffing season or chuffing season, or was it cuffing season when you got to go for the thicker boys because they keep you warmer?
Well, I can appreciate, obviously I'm a big girl if you're watching it on video, but I can appreciate the amount of work and dedication and discipline, and sometimes like a little bit of genetic help that having, you know, like the 6-pack, the 8-pack, like because if you're really, really muscular, that doesn't happen because, you know, you're just eating vegetables. Although, you know, abs are made in the kitchen. I mean, you have to get the proper protein intake. My husband is a very low body fat man, and he has had bouts of having like really awesome abs. I've loved him in all shapes. I mean, obviously you know where he's looked, you know, stared at the brown eye, and he, you know, he can still look me in my regular eyes with love and adoration.
And your regular eyes are
so
maybe it's because,
but it's I mean that takes a lot of work. But like I'm not the one, you know, like the reality of it. I'm not the one that's gonna want to be in the gym. Or, you know, I'm going to be like, would you bring me home a pizza? And then I would feel guilty. So yeah, the dad bods can, you know.
Well, you think like they can help ease some guilt because he's eating the pizza with you, instead of being like, I'm going to be over here with my protein shake, you know, doing curls as I'm drinking it.
The dad bod would bring home 2 pizzas, so it would be better because then there's 2 different kinds and you can share.
The dad bod would call and say, how many tacos do you want? I'm making a run.
And then double it because, you know, I'm trying to be like dainty and feminine. Like I only want 2 tacos. I told Marvin that once. I'm like, I just want a taco. He brought me back a singular taco. And I had to tell him, I'm like, I may say I want a taco, but one is always at least 6. Like, don't even. And he was a fast learner with that, so bless his heart.
Well, I'm all for, I mean, you know, yes, I like to write the strong, buff, big, muscular men, and my women are typically curvy and size 18 and proud of it, and they don't apologize for it. I'm all for, normalizing who we are, because we all love all different shapes, sizes, colors.
And honestly, I think it's also, what you're writing. For example, your werewolves, I would assume, are going to be big and powerful and muscular. And even if they're a little on the thick side, it's not going to be a dad bod. It's just going to be like that much more muscle.
Except in a book that's coming out in May, I do have a werewolf that has let himself go, but he's a bad guy. So, that's all, glutton and all of that. But, I'm always interested in reading shifter books when they're the bear shifter, the polar bear, the big grizzly. Because to me, that would, in human form, they would still be powerful, but I think they would have extra padding. So I always, in my mind, they're already dad bods. I mean, and I'm always kind of like thrown off if they do a full human body description and they're like so buff and cut and everything. I'm like, really? Have you looked at a polar bear?
You know what? This is totally off tangent, but I think I'm getting a little worked up that like mom bod isn't something that is like, ooh, I mean, because I had a C-section, now I have a fupa. That's not, the treasure lid isn't something that's always talked, warmly about, but, the guys, it's a double standard.
Like mom bods, okay, so that I think, falls into the curvy thing, and I don't think we necessarily talk about that.
Because there's never breastfed my child, and now I have deflated balloons.
Talk about that. Yeah, I mean, good point. They don't talk, but I did read one where the heroine was curvy, and the guy said, "Oh, I love your thick thighs," and I'm just like, it just struck me as weird, because I'm like, do we have to, because if my husband came up to me and said, "Oh my God, you're so fat, I love you," I would probably punch him. Yeah, I just he just doesn't. He knows I'm self-conscious about my belly and the hangover, and he doesn't, he just finds me overall attractive because he loves me and he desires me, but not for any except my boobs, any particular, part of me. And he doesn't maybe because he doesn't describe like what it is about. He just loves them. He doesn't describe what it is about my boobs.
Do you think that could be cultural too? As what because I know that some obviously different body shapes and sizes. I know personally I prefer to watch British TV, not that there's like a huge cultural difference, but I feel like it's more allowed to have like normal representation of like the actors,
and they're naked a lot more so you can see it.
Well, yeah. But I mean, it's because I do feel like Hollywood, especially for US culture, it's a lot of similar body types.
The lollipop, big head, tiny, size 0, nothing bodies. Yeah.
And even on like for the men's side, like I can feel for as much as sometimes body issues aggravate me as being a woman, I know that there's also the same double standard for men too. Like, you need to be like 6 foot and built with the 6-pack because you can't have a dad bod. But I don't think that side is talked about so much.
I felt so bad last night because John Cena, the wrestler, he ended up on the mat and where the camera was, he has a big round bald spot. And like we'd heard this made fun of like in the last year. But it was a big, and I even said, "Oh my God, I can't believe how bald he's getting," and then I was like, "Well, that's kind of, that's judgmental." But I was like, "He's worked very hard. He grew his hair out to cover it. He's gonna be upset that like, because it was
because he hasn't owned that,
right.
So he's self-conscious. So then you're just like,
and then
he's probably dying on the inside when he sees that replay.
Well, I was just like, oh my gosh, it's so big, and the camera was right there, and so, I'm sorry, John Cena, but it was right there.
It was right there. I have noticed because I'm reading a lot more male these days. Actually, I kind of have all year, so I can't say these days. That the variety in body types, I think, is a little varied. It's okay to, and I know I've had a couple characters that have talked about like their paunch. And that's about as far as it goes. They just acknowledge it and then they move on.
But then again, that's kind of, selling the dream, because I do believe that there's like a little niche for everything or a little fetish for everything, but the majority probably don't want to read about the, you know, the single mom that like may pee a little bit when she squats because, you know, it was a tough pregnancy or so, you know, we leave those things out so we can forget about those
definitely
problems.
like those body functions. I think we try to pretend that they don't exist. Well, I had, what was it? I had a book I read where the characters brush their teeth, and one of the reviews was, "Oh, thank God, it showed them brushing their teeth." Because I'm just like, do we have to write in every like hygiene thing?
Read Kristen Ashley, because she talks about not only brushing the teeth first thing in the morning, no kissing until they brush their teeth, the flossing are in a lot of her books, and I'm always just like, oh, okay,
and like in detail, not just in
well,
passing.
no, just
she brushed and flossed.
Well, but I mean, but it's always like. And like she would go back out to after the first night of the guy and floss. Do you have floss? I mean, you know, I'm just like, okay, you know, okay. I think though that we're seeing more of the, you know, squat, this, you know, a little pee discharge in the books that are the chick lit, the mid-crisis books, especially the ones that are going into like they get magic and they solve mysteries, like things like that. You're seeing a lot more of the realism. You know, in fact, I think there must be a checklist somewhere, but they talk about, you know, the droopy boobs, having to wear Spanx and hating them, and things like that. And like, you know, they'll say, you know, or they'll be like, I was so scared, I think I peed a little, and things like that. It's more, it's in there.
But those aren't romance books.
Well, they have romance. Okay. Usually it's a very slow burn.
I'm gonna say, I feel like depending on where you're putting in your categories, like on which, you know, retailer, that sometimes like the chick lit is under romance, and then sometimes, but I feel like those get moved around so arbitrarily. Like,
well, and it's also not just the body types, but I read a sci-fi where the heroine was like in her 50s. I think, and he was in his 60s, but he was an alien, so, you know, he was healthy as all get out. But like, they're doing all this running around, and I'm like, oh girl, that is not happening. You know, I'm just like, you are not doing all this running. I mean, even if you're a healthy 50-year-old, like, you're still like, oh, my hip, or oh, my bursitis, you know, or something like that. Of course, I was also reading this before my hip replacement, so it was just like I call cap. That's not work.
Most of my characters fall to like 20s and to like early to mid 30s, and I don't do that on purpose. I don't know. For me, I guess that's like the sweet spot where maybe you don't have like all of the responsibilities of like, you know, a family and getting even, but I mean, there's plenty that still find that late in life or can work on their career. Because I was questioning myself that the other day when I was putting dishes away, wasn't actively writing, but was doing some work that like the age of my characters all kind of seem to fit within about like the same 10 to 15 year range. And, you know, why is that? But maybe that's just my voice as a writer.
It could be, or maybe it's where you are personally.
Oh God, I've realized that I am no longer in my 20s, and I've embraced.
But you remember those years.
Right.
Yeah.
I think it has to do with like how you felt about it, how the memories have stuck with you. Like, was, you know, that was a time of change, of growth, of oh, the light bulb came on and I started to see the world and things like that.
You make me sound like so cultured.
I was such a hot mess. I you know, I can't stand the thought of having my characters, because I'm like, I can't write that hot mess. I just, because that was me. But, you know, like, for example, when I wrote my Tin Man, the first one in the series, that set the stage for them being in their 40s, because the whole point with Tin Man was that his cyborg parts were glitching and his aging human parts, you know, so it's like, which is going to take me out first? You know, is it that, you know, my cyborg is going to kill me, or just I'm going to die from my aging human parts? And I know 40 is not like, you know, the end of the world by any means, but it was just the combination of the two. He's like, you know, I'm old, you know, I can't do this. My cyborg parts are falling apart.
Your body can feel old at 40, depending on, you know, what you've done to your body.
You know, and I think a lot of that, you know, what he'd been through, you know, in his career and emotionally, and being alone and being a cyborg where he felt he couldn't make any connections with anybody, that played into it as well. So that kind of set the stage for this being a seasoned romance trilogy for that reason.
Do you think in reading romance or romance adjacent books right now, we're paying as much, or is as much attention paid to descriptions of characters, physical descriptions? Because I don't think they are. I think we're getting away from that. It used to be, and then we had to hear every time they changed clothes, like we heard what they wore from the earrings to the shoes. And I think, we're getting farther and farther away from that, which I'm really happy, because that takes a lot of thinking.
Anytime I read something and like clothing or something is being described a lot, I'm like, you're foreshadowing. So what's going to go down at this party with this like nice suit or this fancy dress? Although I'm guilty of eyes. Like I do too many eye descriptors, and I feel like I'm trying to make them like communicate just I don't know.
Eyes.
Editors called me out on that
I
a few
agree.
times.
I think there have been times, even recently, that I'm like halfway through the book, and it's like, oh, I didn't realize he had brown hair, or something like that.
I got a lady email me once that said, it wasn't until the end that I realized he was African American.
Well, but and especially for that, I think we get so self-conscious that we don't want to make a big deal out of it. But you want to slide that in, but then we don't ever talk about, her mayonnaise colored skin. So then it's like, where do you go? But then, then you put it in, and I'm like, okay, are they trying to say that her crinkly hair, I don't know if that's what they say, but it's like, okay, what does this mean? Because obviously it's important.
I would take that as a compliment, because
well, I was like, and then I was like, oh my God, how, because by the time the book comes out, I've like written 2 and I'm on writing the 3rd. I'm like, let me go back, and I'm like, pulling up words, and I'm like, no, right here, and
You just missed it.
And I'm like, good for you that you're so, your world is so wide, and you weren't actually kind of taking these cues. Yay for that. But I was just like, oh my God.
I'm just trying to be sunshine to say, like, she was so engrossed in the story. She like character description, because sometimes I like when you have a name or there's a name that I can't pronounce, like in my head it's just like blah, 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 or I make one up. Sometimes I'll do that with like character descriptions too. If I think it's just like, I don't know, it just doesn't stick. It goes over, because I may have already have someone like in my head like pictured in.
And does it really matter? Like if it's just, they're just a person.
But then it could really matter, depending, because certain aspects could impact the story.
Well, if you're reading like monster or sci-fi,
what is an orc? I thought everyone had tusks.
I am so fascinated in the orcs and the kissing with the tusks. I am fascinated by this, and I just read one. I think Friday night. And she even says, what do we do with these tusks? He's like, oh no, just lean forward and purse your lips. And it all worked out. But
I would be more concerned about the like going downtown with those tusks, because, maybe I want some.
I think they're handles. I would think.
No, I'm thinking of like oral.
I am too, and he's between her.
How big are the tusks if she's holding on?
I think they're like big, like
mammoths.
I
always thought it was just.
I thought they were mammoths.
Well,
my orcs are. He's mammoth all over.
Have you seen pictures of orcs? Artistic rendering.
Oh my God, you've ruined them. I'm always going to picture like a walrus now.
Only in reverse.
Oh yeah, or like a woolly mammoth.
Well, and that's the thing. Okay, so here.
Well, then it wouldn't really matter, because there's that trunk.
There are times when I'm reading and things are going down there, and I'm like maybe I just am not very flexible. And I'm like, how can you reach down there yourself? I just like, they're doing things. I'm like, that takes a lot of contortioning. That just seems a little excessive.
Well, and usually and then like how they shift from one move to the next. Okay. You and I were dancers, Ava. I mean, we do have a degree of flexibility, but there are just certain things.
You just got to do it.
And a lot of times you got to dismount. You got to dismount. and reattach.
Well,
I mean, there's none of this like, oh, you just roll and climb and the leg goes over, and everything's still all together.
well, and all like
So at some point somebody's farting during all this.
Well, I was just gonna bring up like the queef or something, or the. I love how like they make the sound sexy, but sometimes like the slurple whatever sounds you're kind of like what has happened?
Yeah.
Like have we stepped in a mud puddle?
I was like, what was that? And well, it's always like, what was that? And is there something I should be concerned about? If I hit a wet spot, what is it gonna feel like? Yeah, I'm with you. And we know that I'm not good with
But again, that's part of like selling the fantasy, selling the dream.
Yeah. So I don't. Yes. As authors, I think we try to make everything as realistic as possible, but it's also fiction. Okay, so I think there's also that let's maybe set aside some of the rules. Although, from a standpoint of trying to be representative, yes, Dad Bods are a big part of that.
Such a great thing of having like the vast amount of authors, because there is representation. Sometimes it can be harder to find, but there is.
It also depends on on what you're reading. Like, for example, I don't read historical anymore, and I remember when it was like from top to bottom, extensive description of the hairstyle.
Well, they did all that research. They they're gonna. My God, I spent 3 hours at the library, and
I'm reading like gladiators in space, and I'm like, lucky if they mention a loincloth. So okay, yeah.
I'm with you. I get messages from my editor, and it's like, could you tell me a little bit what they look like? We're in the 4th chapter, and I have no idea. I'm like, really? Because I see them really good in here.
Yeah. You can't tell. You can't read my mind.
Yeah, it's like, really?
I feel like this episode should come with a warning beforehand that it may not be appropriate for all audiences due to
TMI
graphic content. Definitely not suitable for work.
If you are an orc lover, just turn it off before.
She's gonna ruin it. She's gonna ruin it for you.
Well, okay.
Okay, well, I'll admit, because I'm also reading an orc right now. And I just have this, that like, he's just so much bigger, and I just have this vision that like his head is like this big compared to the other person's head. So then it's like when it like ow, my hips are hurting trying to vision it down there. And anyway,
so I just read, and they were like a feline species, so like cat, hair, tail, all. But then I'm like, oh, they're kissing, and they have like this, like describing just a little bit of like the split lip and like the bigger like teeth. But I'm like, you'd be getting a hair in your mouth. I mean, I'm
hairball.
I mean, I don't kiss on my dogs, but just living in the same house with them, like
there's hair.
I'm always getting like hair in my mouth. So I'm like, how?
Well, that's the other thing. I mean, if we're talking about getting hair in our mouth, when there's any sort of oral going on, nobody's picking curlies out, and that happens.
Maybe everyone just grooms really well.
But they don't.
They don't. Well,
even
if you do, it's still gonna happen. So.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's probably good.
On that note.
On that note.